Greetings Mavericks and new viewers. Tonight, direct and live from the Maverick News Network World Studios. This is Maverick News with Rick Walker.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Rick Walker. Welcome back to the Maverick News Channel. I forgot to change the background because we were doing the Maverick Midnight Matinee last night. And it's good that I didn't change the background because we had some technical problems during the program. And that's okay because it gives me an excuse to talk about it again right now. I just have to say that Scarlet Street, the movie from Maverick Midnight Matinee last night, was fantastic. I hadn't seen it before. 1945, Fritz Lang, starring Edward G. Robinson. A tale of murder, deception, and to some degree even redemption. And it was a real twist in the end. If you didn't get a chance to join us last night for that, go check it out. It's still up. There was an audio problem. Audio fixed at about 19 minutes, 30 seconds into the broadcast, but worth the skip ahead and the time to watch that movie. Timeless classic, and I wish I'd seen it a long time ago. But it's up and ready for you anytime you want in the Maverick Midnight Matinee archive over on the Maverick News Channel across various platforms, including Rumble, BitChute, and some others, Twitch, Twitter. And tonight we are broadcasting on all of those platforms, plus Instagram and YouTube. So we're right across. We're firing on all cylinders here, I think, tonight, finally. So I think we also have the technical problems fixed, and we'll fix that background after we do the next transition and start talking about the Moldova election. Now, maybe you think it's not something that is of importance to you, but I would suggest otherwise. My observations make me think Ukraine 2.0. It's right next door to Ukraine. They're having not just an election tomorrow, but also there is a referendum on joining the European Union. How did all of this stuff start in Ukraine? Elections, allegations of coups, foreign meddling, and a desire from the Ukrainian people to join the European Union. Vladimir Putin didn't like that. And I'm not just talking about NATO. I'm talking about more integration into the European Union for economic reasons. It's all playing out in Moldova tomorrow. And as a result, what do we have? We have allegations of foreign meddling. We have allegations of Russia trying to influence the election coming from the West tonight. So we'll talk about that in some depth. Also, we'll take a look at sky high, record high gold prices and the other top stories of the day. So stay with me. There's a lot to share with you tonight here on Maverick News.
You know, someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on Earth.
The entire world is watching.
Every dictator, every crazy dictator in the world is watching. The world is watching. on TV,
The entire world is watching.
on social media.
But the entire world is watching, and yes, they are seeing what we have apparently bravely been willing to say that others are thinking.
Stand for freedom. Literally stand for freedom. Let's get this done. The entire world is watching.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars.
Maverick News. Maverick News. Maverick News.
Let me have more control of my own destiny.
The world is watching. Greetings, brave Mavericks. Our quest for truth continues. We go beyond fake news. Together we expose propaganda. Together we pull others out of rabbit holes. We are maverick thinkers. We are all unique individuals. Defenders of individual rights and freedoms. Credible. Trusted. Grounded in reality. Maverick News. Maverick News. Defending free speech. Free speech. Donate at freedomreporters.com. Do it now. Tomorrow may be too late. Maverick News. The world is watching. Maverick News. Fighting for freedom.
Okay, we're back, and tomorrow, Moldova stands at a pivotal moment with its presidential election and a concurrent referendum on enshrining the European Union membership as a strategic goal in its constitution. So this election tomorrow is not just a choice between candidates, but a referendum on Moldova's geopolitical alignment, caught between its historical ties with Russia and an increasingly assertive push toward Western integration. Echoes of what happened in Ukraine. The incumbent president, Mala Sandu, a vocal proponent for European integration, seeks a second term. Facing off against several candidates with varying degrees of pro-Russian sentiment, the election has drawn significant international attention due to its implications for regional stability, especially amidst concerns of Russian interference aimed at swaying public opinion and electoral outcomes. What am I talking about? What are you talking about, Rick? Well, all you got to do is look online, look around the world, look at all these different countries that are focusing on what's going on in Moldova, and you will see a great deal of concern. In fact, many stories coming in tonight about surveillance at airports in Moldova. Here's a BBC report about this. Russian cash for votes flows into Moldova as the nation heads to polls. So they've been finding huge sums of cash on people coming through the airport. And they've been confiscating the cash. Sniffer dogs, it says, at Chisinau Airport have been working extra hard in recent months, searching for money that might be evidence of Russian meddling in Moldovan politics. A black retriever gives every suitcase that rolls in on the baggage claim belts a good sniff on all sides. If she detects cash, she will freeze. Back in May, she was doing that a lot. There's the dog. What a cute dog. That's a great looking dog. And quite a sniffer on that dog. They've confiscated, I guess, well over $1 million in cash at the airport. And according to this report on the BBC, the people who've had the cash confiscated, nobody has asked for any of it back. Right here. So police and prosecutors began seizing the cash in one day alone. They say they scooped $1.5 million. No one even asked for their money back. The authorities believe the cash mules are part of a major and ongoing operation to buy political influence run by a fugitive Moldovan oligarch named Elon Shore, convicted of a major fraud in Chisinau. He is now resident in Russia, which will not extradite him. Oh, Russia would never do anything like that, would they? Yeah, they would. And of course, the U.S. is over there observing the elections. They have a real interest in this as well. Western countries do. Western European countries, very interested in what's going on in Moldova. Why? Why Moldova? Well, just take a look at a map. Let's take a look at a map. And I'll show you why. Everybody's looking at Moldova. If I had it up here, where is it? We got to be very close here. Too many tabs. Maybe I should just open a brand new one. We'll just open a brand new tab. We'll get you a picture of a map of Moldova. For those of you who are just average, ordinary, everyday folks, and maybe don't pay too much attention to Moldova. Let me try this again. Let's get us this map of Moldova up here for you. Here we go. This is what I wanted to show you. Let's get this up on the screen. Google Maps. That'll do the trick. Take a look. Here's Moldova, right there. Where is it? Oh, there's Ukraine. It's right next door. Where's Ukraine? Right next door to Russia. And of course, these were all Soviet bloc countries, right? When the Soviet Union was all together. How did all this turmoil begin in Ukraine? Because Ukraine wanted to join, is joining the European Union for economic reasons. And you know, when the Soviet Union was together, it's my understanding that Ukraine was responsible for about 40% of the Soviet bloc countries, 40% of the economic output. And that's because of the resources there, because of the agriculture, the grain. It is the breadbasket for that whole part of the world. In fact, it produces about 10 or 15% of the entire grain supply for the world. It is strategically located right there with the Black Sea, and then it leads on down into this area here, into the Mediterranean Sea, and then finally into the Red Sea, and where the Suez, connected by the Suez Canal, and then you can sail your ships all down in here to Africa, and all down here to India, Malaysia, Indonesia, even Australia, right? Very important strategically, economically, just the location of these countries. Now, Moldova less so than Ukraine, but even here, Moldova, look at this. Look at how, look where are they located here? Look at that. Look, they've got access right down there too. to the Black Sea. Where's the Russian fleet? The Black Sea fleet. Sevastopol. Yes. Very important. So what happens in Moldova tomorrow? Pretty darn important. That's why everybody's focused on it. Everybody wants a piece of the pie down there. Not just for political reasons, for business reasons. Oligarchs, super rich guys. Yeah. Yeah, the oligarchs. You think all these countries, they all have their rich people, right? So they've got a vested interest in what goes on there too. Not just like we're talking billions and trillions of dollars at stake with these elections and referendums, and it's also about freedom. It's a battle of ideas as much as anything else. So we'll be keeping a close eye on all of that tomorrow as all of this unfolds, and then you get all these allegations of foreign meddling and, oh no, Russia would never do that. It's not just Russia. It's all the European unions, European countries. It's the United States. It's the West versus the East versus Russia versus Moldova versus Ukraine versus the United States. It's the Britain. All of them. They're all involved. And it's a tug of war, is what it is. And caught in the middle of it all is people and freedom. So we'll keep an eye on it. Huge moment for Moldova. Moldova, since its independence from the Soviet Union, has oscillated between pro-European and pro-Russian alignments. The current initiative reflects a broader desire, this desire to join the European Union. It's a bigger desire among parts of its populace for EU integration, promising potential economic benefits, stability, and alignment with Western democratic values. All of this happening against the backdrop of the creation of the BRICS nations, which is an assault on the Western economic dominance, in particular U.S. economic dominance. This is economic warfare. And tomorrow's election is all part of that. Hopefully, it's truly a democratic process in the end. But with all these foreign governments focused on it, I don't know how democratic it ends up being. I would hope that our countries would be interested in preserving, facilitating actual democracy. Obviously, other countries, some countries, I don't know. You can make your own assessment. Personally, as I sit and look at it, I see a lot of countries in there trying to exert influence in various ways. Moldova was granted EU candidate status in June of 2022. It marked a significant step towards EU integration. And so you've got all these people very concerned about the emergence of BRICS, and yet these countries still want to join the European Union because the West is still incredibly powerful, still incredibly dominant globally, economically. So this candidacy status for Moldova has not only been a recognition of Moldova's reforms within the country, but also a strategic move by the EU to support Moldova against Russian influence. So what's the purpose of this referendum? By amending the Constitution to include EU membership as a strategic goal, the referendum seeks to make Moldova's EU integration path harder to reverse by future governments, thereby ensuring a consistent policy direction. The people there remember what it was like living under the rule of communist Russia, the Soviet Union. Moldova was part of that. The people will, in my view, tomorrow vote for European Union integration because there is this ongoing desire for freedom. And the people there have not forgotten the fall of the Soviet Union. They have not forgotten what it was like to live under communist rule, under the thumb of Russia, under the boot of Russia at that time, and they don't want to go back to that. That's what I think will happen tomorrow, as long as the electoral process, the democratic process, is actually permitted to play out properly. So the current president, a strong proponent of European integration, leads the Yes campaign, arguing that EU membership would bring economic improvements and security. Conversely, the opposition, largely backed by pro-Russian sentiments, campaigns for a no, emphasizing closer ties with Russia or maintaining neutrality, which might also be a good thing. We don't want too much conflict over there, but the people should be allowed to decide for themselves. That's freedom, sovereignty, self-determination. There have been allegations and evidence, though, of Russian efforts to sway Moldovan public opinion against EU integration. I think it's dangerous, but we see these efforts even here. If you think that Russia isn't trying to influence the U.S. presidential election or the Canadian elections or elections in other countries, you're blind. It's like, duh, of course they are. They're involved. How much are they involved? Is what they're doing illegal? I don't know, man. You have to assess it. But it's happening. It's absolutely happening. In a free society, it's part of our Achilles heel, our vulnerability. Free speech, freedom of expression, free media. What is propaganda? What's misinformation? Is it okay for someone, even a foreign government, to exert influence through media? It's not just about filling out fake ballots to control or influence an election or a referendum. It's about exerting influence, even through information campaigns and just news coverage, foreign news coverage on, even through Sputnik or RT or CNN or ABC, NBC. How much of what you're watching is actually real journalism and how much is government-controlled political propaganda from any side? You got to start to really... Well, as I've said, it's important for people to become very media literate these days, because the technology being used to reach your brain is so sophisticated. So polls suggest a majority of Moldovans support EU integration. As I said, I think they'll vote in favor, vote yes tomorrow for European integration. So these polling figures show that around 60 to 65% are in favor and will vote yes. That's a substantial, leaning toward yes. However, there's a significant challenge in voter turnout. The referendum needs a minimum turnout of 33% to be valid, which has become a focus for both sides of the campaign. It isn't just about where the public mood is or attitude or view. It depends on what the demographic makeup of the actual people who actually turn up to vote might end up being. For many Moldovans, European Union membership represents hope for economic improvement, with expectations of higher wages, better living conditions, and opportunities for youth who have been leaving the country in significant numbers due to economic hardships. Sounds like the kind of concerns we have right here at home. I remain somewhat optimistic about the future, however, for a variety of reasons, which we will talk about a little bit more later when we get into talking about what's going on with gold price. So the referendum's outcome could have broader implications, though, for European security architecture, particularly concerning how the European Union and NATO might further engage with Eastern European nations amidst ongoing tensions with Russia. This referendum is more than just a vote on EU membership, folks. It's a pivotal moment for Moldova's future direction, caught between its historical ties with Russia and its aspirations for European integration. The outcome will likely influence Moldova's internal policies, its international relations, and could shape the geopolitical balance in Eastern Europe. And make no mistake, given what's going on in that part of the world, especially in Ukraine and even inside Russia, because Ukrainian forces have gone in, they're inside the Russian border itself now. This is going to reverberate around the world and have an impact right here at home. You wait and see. What's going on in Ukraine is not isolated to Ukraine. This is an expansion of all of the political tension, the political tug of war that's going on between Russia and Ukraine. Is not just that. It's Russia, it's the BRICS nations, and the struggle for economic dominance, world dominance, with the West. It's just an expansion of what we've been seeing. Very concerning. It's an election. Let's hope it stays in the sphere of politics and an election and doesn't boil over into what we've got, another Ukraine 2.0, another war, or an expansion of what already is a third world war.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
Okay, let's go to Latrobe, Pennsylvania. Trump is speaking live right now, so let's pick up that.
I'm going to McDonald's to work
talking about
French fry.
She's talking about Kamala Harris.
I think so.
Says she's lied about working at McDonald's. He's going to go in there and work himself.
And I think it's in a place in Pennsylvania, and I'm going to stand over that French fry. She lied about her. It's a very basic thing to say. They'll say, oh, look at all that press. That's a lot of press. But they're going to say, oh, it's so basic. It is basic. But the basic is easier to understand. She said, as part of a resume, for years, I worked at McDonald's, Tough. It's probably tough. But she never worked there. It turned out to be a hoax. So on top of all of this, Kamala turned on our military and wants to make them woke. Take a look at our real military. Just take a look at it.
You little scumbag! I got your name! I got your ass! You will not.
I guess we don't get to see the video when he does these things.
Happy Pride. Happy Pride Month. And actually, let's declare it a summer of pride.
So you're a killer? Sir, yes, sir! Let me see your war face. Sir, you got a war face? Ah! That's a war face! Now let me see your war face! Ah! Bullshit! You didn't convince me! Let me see your real war face! Ah!
Where do they pick up these? Like they have picked these people to stand behind him. I think they do that in politics. They are. I'm gonna just pull this audio down a little bit while we.
You are nothing but unorganized, grabastic pieces of amphibian shit.
I'm just gonna pull this down while the audio while they play that video. You see the people behind him? It's like they're. I don't know. It's a populist movement, right? It's sort of, socialist. It is a socialist thing. So they're trying to show working class people, I think, behind him. And, I think that sometimes that they're just picking people that fit a particular image. That's what politics is about, cliches, marketing. The guy with what looked like a fire hat, a guy with a construction worker hat. It's kind of like a heterosexual village people thing.
So in conclusion, and thank you for being here, everybody. This is beautiful. We'll get you out
I
real
hadn't thought of that before, but yeah, that's what it
We're
is.
going to get you go watch that game tonight, right?
That's why they
We
play
really
the
do
YMCA.
appreciate this kind of crowd and love. The love that we've had is incredible. But with your vote this November, we are going to fire Kamala Harris. We are going to save America. We're going to rebuild our nation for citizens of every race, religion, color, and creed. With your support, we will teach our children to love our country, honor our history, and to always respect our great American flag. We will cut your taxes, demolish inflation, slash your prices, raise your wages, and turn the United States into the manufacturing superpower of the world. We will hire American, buy American, build American, and show the whole world that the American dream is back, bigger, better, and stronger than ever before. I will end the war in Ukraine, stop the chaos in the Middle East, and prevent World War III. And I'm the one that can do it. I'm the only one that's going to do it. I will crush violent crime and give our police the support, protection, and resources. And we have to give them respect again. We're going to give them respect like they've never had. And they're going to get rid of crime, and they'll get rid of it quickly and efficiently. We cannot live with the kind of crime that we're living with in our country today. We will strengthen and modernize our military. I rebuilt our military, and now we're going to modernize it still further. We will build a missile defense shield, all made in the USA, including the Commonwealth is going to build a lot of it. We're entitled to it. We're entitled to it. Others have it. We want it too. And we will land an American astronaut on Mars. Get ready, Elon. Get ready. We got to land and we got to do it quickly. But a lot of that has to do with military, the space. I created Space Force, and it's going to go down, in my opinion, it's just about the most important with time of the forces. We were way behind Russia and China, and now we're leading them by a lot. It's a great thing. Space Force, first time in 82 years since Air Force that this happened. We will rebuild our cities, including our capital in Washington, D.C., making them safe, clean, and beautiful again. We will get critical race theory and transgender insanity the hell out of our schools. And we will immediately keep men out of women's sports. I will defend religious liberty. I will restore free speech. And I will defend the right to keep and bear arms, our Second Amendment. And we will end sanctuary cities and stop illegal immigration once and for all. We want people to come into our country, but they have to come in legally. After years of building up foreign countries, defending foreign borders, and protecting foreign lands, we will finally be going to build our country, defend our borders, and protect our American cities, suburbs, and towns. We will protect them like they have never been protected before. We will not be invaded. We will not be occupied. We will not be conquered. That's what they're doing. This is an invasion into our country of a foreign military. We will be free and proud as a nation again. Everyone will prosper. Every family will thrive, and every day will be filled with opportunity and hope. But for that to happen, we must defeat Kamala Harris and stop her radical left agenda once and for all. It will happen. It will happen. We want a landslide that's too big to rig. So early voting is underway. Get everyone you know and vote. After all, we have been through together. We stand on the verge of the 4 greatest years in the history of our country. These will be 4 of the greatest years in the history of our country, and it's going to happen quickly. With your help from now until Election Day, we will redeem America's promise and we will take back the nation that we love. We are one people, one family, and one glorious nation under God. We will never give in. We will never back down, ever, ever, ever. And we will never, ever surrender. Together we will fight, fight, fight. We will vote, vote, vote. And we will win, win, win like we have never won before. November 5th will be the most important day in the history of our country, and together we will make America powerful again. We will make America wealthy again. We will make America healthy again. We will make America strong again. We will make America proud again. We will make America safe again. And we will make America great again. Thank you, Pennsylvania. Thank you. God bless you all. God bless you.
And they start to play the Village People song for the heterosexual village people that they had picked to dance behind Donald Trump as he does his signature dance moves on stage. It's funny. Oh, he's such a good dancer. Oh God. Well, if he doesn't win the election, he can always open the Donald Trump dance studios, and it'll be like his own. What was the school that he once had? Well, he can now open a dance school, and they'll teach all the Donald Trump dance moves. Okay, enough of that. The heterosexual MAGA village people.
Maverick News. The world is watching.
Did you know 7-Eleven is in the process of closing over 400 stores? Yeah. They're all apparently underperforming 7-Eleven locations across North America. So the company, 7 and Holdings, which is the Change Japan-based parent company, is closing 444 locations in total of 7-Eleven, shutting down because of a variety of issues. Slow sales, declining traffic, inflationary pressures, and a decrease in tobacco purchases. That's big time an issue up here in Canada. That's been a really serious issue, especially for independent variety store operators, tobacco sales. A lot of that business has been lost at the convenience store level because First Nations, of course, is where First Nations reserves is where most people, I think, who smoke go to purchase their tobacco now because it's way cheaper. They're not paying the taxes over there. So it's been a huge hit. I have a friend who has a variety store, convenience store, and she has really, really suffered over the years because they lost just that portion of the business. They don't make much on a package of tobacco, but of course it's a volume business. So a specific list of the locations has not really been released yet, but the chain has more than 13,000 stores across the United States, Canada, Mexico. So this amounts to about 3% of its entire fleet of 7-Eleven stores. Pretty significant. Some people criticizing the company, though, suggesting they are doing this in a way that it is not fair because they're being accused of closing most locations in minority neighborhoods, especially black neighborhoods. That's the allegation anyway. But I think that you are looking at an evolving business under a lot of pressure these days because the economy is changing. It's changed in so many ways, especially since the pandemic. 7-Eleven says it will continue to invest in food in the United States since it's now the highest sales category and a top draw for customers. So they have competitors like Wawa and Sheetz, and they're earning higher income satisfaction scores than 7-Eleven with their overall offerings. While 7-Eleven is ranking way lower, they have a lot of work to do to, I think, improve on their customer service. And Circle K, another big convenience store chain, they've offered to take over. They've got an offer on the table, I guess, to take over 7-Eleven. $8 billion has been added to their offer, which now stands, I believe, at over $47 billion for 7-Eleven stores. Wow, man, wow. Hard to believe there's that much money in individual cans of soda pop and convenience store items. Wow. So all that going on while gold is at an all-time high. It recently surged to an all-time high, reaching $2,736 per ounce. That's U.S. That's, well, I don't know what that is in Canadian dollars. 27.36. What is that? Let me just see. 27.36 USD to Canadian is $3,779.10 per ounce for gold. I remember when I was a kid, teenager, gold was poised to hit about $500 an ounce. And everybody was freaking out because it represented, it reflects when gold spikes in price. It's always for a variety of reasons, but it always signifies inflationary pressures. So even when it was reaching for the $500 mark back in the day, we're talking like what? That would be 1980s, yeah. And a lot of concern even way back then, but these things are all relative. So because this price of $27.36 per ounce, this peak marks the second time this week that gold has broken its previous record. And it is a record in nominal terms. It's driven by a combination of factors, including heightened geopolitical tensions in the Middle East, which, of course, we've seen, especially with the death of Yahya Sinwar, the Hamas leader. Now today we're seeing a drone attack on Netanyahu's home He says that Israel won't be deterred, even though they're trying to take out his house. And there's, of course, uncertainty surrounding the upcoming U.S. election. So gold's appeal as a safe haven investment has been significantly amplified by these global uncertainties, leading investors to seek refuge in gold, traditionally viewed as a hedge against economic instability and inflation, which we're seeing is having an impact even at the convenience store level. So this year alone, gold prices have soared about 30%, outpacing major stock indices like the S&P 500 and NASDAQ. The surge in gold's value has been further supported by expectations of lower interest rates from the Federal Reserve, which typically boost gold prices, and a notable increase in central bank gold purchases, particularly from China, aiming to diversify away from the U.S. dollar. The emergence of the BRICS nations. When interest rates are lower, people turn more to gold. That's what happens. The recent escalation highlighted by the death of the leader of Hamas is a significant development as well, because it signifies, potentially more instability, maybe leading to more stability. But when you have instability in the world, then people get very worried about the economy in general, because you never know how it's going to impact supply chains and the economy in general, and how much economic output needs to be devoted to defense, and how much will go into the war. And when things are uncertain, people turn to gold. But it's important to keep all of this in perspective. I've spoken to a number of people over the past 24 hours about gold prices. Some people are very concerned. They think this might even signify the beginning of the end of Western economy. But keep it in perspective. You have to understand the price of gold in context, because it goes beyond just nominal price. Nominal price, this is the actual dollar about it, which gold is trading. So yeah, 2,736 per ounce, okay, today. It might be a little different at this hour. So this figure alone, though, doesn't give a full picture of gold's value. You have to look at gold's real purchasing power. This considers the price of gold adjusted for inflation. If gold's price rises, but inflation rises faster, the real purchasing power of gold could actually decrease. Conversely, if the price of gold increases at a rate higher than inflation, its real value increases. Also, you have to keep in mind that when you see spikes up or down in the markets, regardless of whether you're talking about commodities or stocks or anything, there's an emotional factor, a human emotional factor that comes into play. And there's usually, almost inevitably, an overreaction from people in both directions, always. And so when you see a spike, it usually will come down if it's going up, and if it tanks, once it tanks, it'll bottom out, but then it'll come back, because there's generally fear involved or inflated expectations on, in a bull market. So you have to keep all of these things in perspective, because $500 an ounce back in the 80s, that represented a whole lot more money back in the 80s. 2,736 today, that represents really less spending power, because that representation in dollar terms is dollars in relation to what 500 would buy back in the day. So I don't know. Let me find out what $500 in, say, what would, how do I do this? 2736 in today's dollars be worth in 1985? What does the computer tell me? worth about $988, 2736 in 1985 dollars. So that's what I'm getting, right up front here. And that's not to say that 2736 would be worth an ounce today would be the equivalent of that in gold. You'd have to do a more detailed analysis. I'm just showing you that the purchasing power of dollars is different today than it was back then, but everything is relative. Wages are much higher today too than they were in the 80s or the 70s or the 60s. When I was a kid in the 1970s, gasoline was selling for, 70 cents a gallon. Today it's dollars per gallon. It's, a dollar $55 or $9 or something a liter, 3.78 liters in a gallon. You can multiply that basically by 4 and then add 40% if you're talking US dollars. I'm talking about 155.9 for a liter in Canadian dollars. And then you see how much gasoline is worth now? How much it costs? That's inflation. But wages are much higher today than they were back then too. So it is all relative. A car that you could buy in the 1970s for, I don't know, what was a car worth back then? Like $7,000. Today they cost $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $100,000, right? Cars cost more today than I paid for the first house that we purchased. So it's all relative. Have to keep that in mind. Keep it in perspective. No question we have an inflation problem. Gold is reflective of that, but I don't think we're as bad off maybe as people might be led to believe when they're just looking at the nominal price, that just straight up dollar price for gold. Gold often rises in times of economic uncertainty, right? And we are in very uncertain times. These are much more uncertain times than they were back in even the 1980s when we were at the height of the Cold War. But now we're really immersed in what is clearly a hybrid sort of fifth generation third world war. Gold reflects market sentiment too and risk aversion. An increase can indicate a shift towards safer assets, but might also be a response to changes in monetary policy, the lowering interest rates rather than an economic crisis. So gold's value over decades shows periods of highs and lows influenced by various global economic conditions. Looking at gold's price in historical context helps us understand if the current price spike is unusual or part of a longer cycle. Price movements can be cyclical, influenced by economic cycles without predicting a crisis. For example, during economic recoveries, gold might not perform as well compared to equities, but can surge during recessions or when there's a flight to safety. And smart economists will tell you that gold isn't really so much an investment. It's really viewed more as a hedge against inflation, because you're buying sort of a static commodity. It's not an investment in a productive enterprise like buying stocks in a company would be. There you're buying into something that is designed, should be producing a profit, and then you get a dividend, not just an increase in value, hopefully, as well, over time as the company grows, the value of the stock itself, but you would also be getting a dividend. So gold's role as a diversifier means its price might rise when other assets fall, but this is part of a balanced investment strategy, not necessarily a harbinger of doom. This big price increase. Sometimes the price of gold can also be influenced by speculative trading or commodity market dynamics, not just economic fundamentals. And you have to keep in mind that there are a number of things driving this. It isn't just monetary policy. It's also, well, not necessarily our monetary policy. It's because you have countries like China buying up more gold because they view gold as something they're going to use to try to back their currencies as the BRICS nations grow and assert more influence over the geopolitical economy. But that's not to say that we're done here in the West. Far from it. Those economies, those countries, including China, are heavily integrated into what we do here. And the US dollar is still dominant even today. And even though some countries are dumping the dollar, the US is still incredibly powerful. The West is still incredibly powerful. That's why Moldova, the majority of people there, according to polling, and we'll see what happens with the EU referendum tomorrow, that's why most of them want to join the European Union. Because it represents democracy. It represents freedom. It represents a legacy of prosperity which contributes to freedom. You need economic prosperity for a society to be truly free, because for people to enjoy or exercise their freedom, freedom of movement, freedom of expression, freedom of any kind, you need to be prosperous, you need to be healthy, you need to have the means to travel, to move from one place to another, to have mobility rights. What good is being free to go wherever you want or would like to go if you don't have enough pocket change to buy fare on even a city bus, let alone a plane ticket to fly across the country, or enough to get a ride on a Greyhound or own a car? So you need prosperity in order to exercise your freedom. The surge in gold prices really can be attributed to a confluence of factors, many factors, reflecting both traditional economic principles and contemporary geopolitical dynamics. And yeah, there are countries, sort of dumping the dollar, and that's because you're seeing a shift away from the requirement to purchase oil in U.S. dollars in the Middle East, which is something that was set up under Nixon back in like 71. So things are changing. There's no question about it. But don't despair. There are many things, many factors that will come into play in the months and certainly the years, even decades ahead. We're not done here, folks. There's massive economic capacity that is untapped here in the West. There will be growth. Technology, new technologies are emerging. And just like the Industrial Revolution fueled, accelerated economic expansion at unprecedented rates in the early 1900s, and that's what has led to today's unprecedented levels of prosperity. That, combined with capitalism and free markets, even though they've always been under pressure from socialists and socialism, which latch onto it and siphon off a lot of the productive capacity to fuel social programs, which largely I don't really have a lot of issues with, as long as there's a decent balance there. But it is capitalism and free markets that have facilitated massive economic expansion, especially here in the West. And that's, again, why you're seeing these post-Soviet countries leaning toward European Union integration. They yearn for freedom. People have a natural inclination to seek freedom, although there is always a tug of war within people's own minds and hearts between a desire for freedom and a desire for safety and security and stability. And if you have political leaders promising you safety and security, you can be darn sure they're, generally speaking, looking to take away a lot of your freedom, if not all of it, in order to give that to you. There's a big trade-off there. If you are on a government paycheck, they're going to want something back for that. If they're giving you a bunch of free stuff, there's absolutely always a price to be paid. And then, right now, of course, people, especially the middle class, getting hit hard by inflation. And although inflation rates have shown signs of cooling, the specter of future inflation, influenced by massive fiscal stimuli and high national debts, continues to drive gold's appeal as a hedge against inflation. Gold is frequently viewed as an inflation hedge, prompting investors to buy gold as basically insurance against future price increases across the board, inflation. And again, like I said, if the government gives you free stuff, there's always a price to be paid. Why are we seeing this massive inflation? It's because the government during the pandemic printed so much money and gave away so much free money, not just to you and I, but also to big corporations, big companies. They gave money away to everybody in order to stimulate the economy so that people could stay home, produce nothing during the pandemic, during lockdowns, and still have enough money, enough liquidity to pay their rent and still go and buy enough at the grocery stores. But during that period of time, the GDP tanked. We had no growth. We were not producing. We had shortages emerging at grocery stores. There was still enough there, which again was a testament to the resilience of free markets, free market capitalism, the Western economy, even in the face of that unprecedented assault on our economy, our society during the pandemic. We survived it, even as our incompetent leaders executed policies that ran contrary to everything that I thought made any kind of common sense at all, and it became an assault on our economy. Well, now we're paying the price, and a lot of people embraced it. And I remember even sitting and talking to a relative of mine at my daughter's wedding, talking about this very thing. And I won't mention who it was, but because this person was singing the praises of Justin Trudeau and how they were so happy that they were able to just stay home for months on end and not work and still get paid. And this person looked at me, and I wasn't saying a thing. They looked right at me, though, as we sat around as a group and looked at me and pointed their finger at me and said, "And don't you say anything," because I knew that this day would come, that we would pay the price with inflation. And now people are very worried, and I get it. And now you're seeing that reflected in the price of gold. That's what it is. It's those major factors that I've laid out for you. You don't get something for free. They might give you free money over here, but you pay for it over there. Now, they give you the money back during the pandemic, but now you're paying for it ultimately with higher prices, because when they print money, it's just really a hidden tax, not like a carbon tax or a sales tax. It's a hidden tax. Free money reduces the value of money relative to everything. So you pay not just more for the fish you buy at the store, or the fruits and vegetables, or the gasoline that you purchase, or anything at all. Kleenex, soda pop, you name it, everything's gone up. I go to the hardware store. I wanted to buy a can of spray paint 2 days ago. I needed a little can of spray paint. $15, right? I was like, I can't. That's crazy. I can't pay $15 for a can of spray paint. What used to cost $9, $8, $15 now, $14.99. Plus tax, sales tax, but the hidden tax has been the inflation from 9 to 15. Insane. And then, of course, you're also paying more for gold. Inevitable. Had to happen. You combine the inflationary pressures of those monetary policies and the money printing combined with the geopolitical instability and this global struggle, war, plus this assault now. This is economic warfare from the BRICS nations, Russia, Brazil, India, China, South Africa, and all the other BRICS nations. They're at war with the Western economy. Make no mistake. And what happens again tomorrow in Moldova, take a very close look at that, because that's going to reveal a lot about what's going on geopolitically and also economically worldwide. There's a lot that we can do to set ourselves up for a prosperous future. And I think ultimately we will just enter some sort of a new era where there will be integration and cooperation economically between the BRICS nations and the Western countries, and we will adapt, we will change. The US dollar, they'll take steps to probably reduce the money supply globally, and we will there's a lot that we can do to adjust and use new technologies to stabilize the economy. Even as we may find that in the West we have to reset, recalibrate, and really shrink maybe the economy. But I think we can globally and share a little bit more with Eastern countries, but we'll find a path forward. We absolutely will. And I don't think we're in as much trouble as people think. I'm much more optimistic, actually, after I've been spending the last couple of months trying to do some analysis on this. Most other podcasters, they want to scare you. They want the clickbait. And I am worried about this, of course. If it's not handled properly, we could face economic disaster. But ultimately, in the end, I don't think the BRICS nations, like China in particular, really would want to destroy us. Russia, maybe they do, because they'd really like to be dominant. And China would like to dominate as well. But you have to remember that China's economy is so heavily integrated into what we do here in Canada and the US. It's not in their best interest to just destroy the West. They hold so much of our debt that if they destroy Western productivity, they'll never get paid. So I don't think that's going to happen. We'll talk about it more in the days and weeks ahead, as we always do. Let's take another quick break. I'll be right back.
Someone very profoundly once said many years ago that if fascism ever comes to America, it'll come in the name of liberalism.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers. If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on Earth.
The entire world is watching.
Every dictator, every crazy dictator in the world is watching. The world is watching. On TV.
The entire world is watching.
On social media. But the entire world is watching, and yes, they are seeing what we have apparently bravely been willing to say that others are thinking.
Stand for freedom. Literally stand for freedom. Let's get this done. The entire world is watching.
We're at war with the most dangerous enemy that has ever faced mankind in his long climb from the swamp to the stars.
Maverick News. Maverick News. Maverick News.
Let me have more control of my own destiny.
The world is watching.
Okay, so there's this dude, Andrew McCarthy, into videography, rented a $17,000 lens to capture this the Starlink rocket reentry, and the engine portion of the rocket comes back down and it gets captured on the tower with the giant monster claws. So Elon Musk posted this video on his X account, and these are stunning pictures. And again, this in itself also is why these days, right now, I'm becoming a little bit more optimistic in the face of all the terrible things going on in the world. And there's a lot to be worried about, and don't get me wrong. But when I see stuff like this, man, do you know what this is? There's so much positive stuff happening in the world, and this is just one of those things. It's like when I go back and I think, back in time, growing up, and I would look even back from before I was born to the 50s, and I think of old car commercials and cars with big fins and rocket ship design, fighter jet designs incorporated into automotive design. There were just so many big ideas that people had that they brought to life back in those days. The 50s, the 60s, there was hope, like to build a better future, to build a better country, that it seemed like there was nothing that we couldn't do. Like we were literally shooting for the stars. It was the space age, the 60s, the 70s. I grew up. I was just very young, in the 60s and 70s. But I remember the moonshots. I remember getting up and watching, I don't know, I'm so young I don't remember which moonshot, but I remember watching it on TV in black and white, no cable, just bunny ears on top of the TV, watching it. I think it was live. I mean, it was crazy. I don't know how the heck they did that. I don't know. Back in those days, I'd have to look at what the technology was to get that stuff live. I don't know, but they were doing it. Anyway, I just think back to those times, and it just seemed like everybody was optimistic. It was like the technology too that was emerging at the time also gave people hope. People weren't afraid of technology as I remember it through the 70s and the 80s when computers came on the scene. Video games, everybody was crazy about video games. Of course, people were worried about things like kids watching too much television, and then when video games came along, even into the 1980s, video arcades, parents were freaking out that, the kids' brains are getting rotted and the violence in the games was corrupting them, and we had video arcades, and those were dens of sin and drug dealers and social problems. Municipalities were passing bylaws to restrict, how close video arcades could be to schools, but that was a reflection of how technology of that time was having an impact on our society and our youth. Me. Maybe that's why I'm so weird. Because I was subjected to so much television and of that era and the video games of the time. But it represented hope. Everybody looked at computers like that's the future. And when the internet came along and we had email, even then, people they didn't run away from it. Some people were very intimidated by it, but people, generally speaking, saw it as a positive thing, I think, at that time, until some people started to lose their jobs. I remember working in a newsroom, one of my very first jobs. And again, I'm not going to give you the name because it might embarrass this person. Super nice guy, and he was into sports, and he was a sportscaster, and he was struggling because at that time, I'm so old, we were still using typewriters in the newsrooms. but computers were just coming online, and word processing programs were being used, and you had to learn how to write your stories in the computer, and then it would get saved into a server, and then that would be used to run the teleprompters for the news anchors, who of course read what they say. They don't just think it, they read it. And this super nice guy who had been working in broadcasting for a long time. He was a veteran and very polished, very popular, great on air, but he had so much trouble just trying to figure out how to save his documents, save his scripts. And I remember even trying to help him myself figure out how to just save files, which today everybody pretty much knows how to do that. Even my mom in her, into her 90s now, she's on her phone and she's saving files. She's not as proficient as a teen or someone in their 20s, but she gets it done. But back then, it was all new. And he ultimately ended up losing his job simply because he could not cope with the technological change. Another friend of mine worked in television at a TV station, struggled because, of course, went to school to learn how to edit videotape, linear videotape. And then when computer technology came along, he was caught in the transition, as I was too. I learned how to cut not only videotape, like physical audio tape with a razor blade and editing like tape. I know how to do that. I can take audio tape, physically cut it, splice it together. I also know how to splice actual film. I taught myself how to do that with film when I was like 9 years old. I used to shoot Super 8mm film and then splice it together and make movies when I was a kid. I've probably talked about it before. Do I have? Oh, you know what? Sitting right here beside me. This is not planned. Look, this is how old I am. I've got stuff like this kicking around, man. I've been around. Okay? This isn't an antique. This is yesterday. To me. But to me, that stuff was cool. All the film projectors, and then a friend of mine, as I say, great photog, great camera guy, but he couldn't cope. He lost his job ultimately because he couldn't learn, he couldn't figure out, has never been able to sort of get into video editing, non-linear, in a computer. Couldn't do it. So he lost his job. Could still shoot fundamentals, knew how to do all of that, but couldn't edit the stuff. And as we got what I would characterize as sort of technological compression and more tasks being funneled into one job, he couldn't cope with it. He was a video editor and photog, couldn't handle the transition from linear to digital and lost his job. But overall, we've wound up with, I think, certainly at that time, it has improved media in a lot of ways because you get live coverage right from the scene without the need for giant satellite trucks, and you have all this, acceleration of information exchange. And again, when all of this was going on, at that time, up until that point, I think people had really looked at technology as a savior of sorts and a positive thing. Around that time, though, as people were having more and more difficulty coping and changing, I think attitudes began to change a little bit. Or maybe I was just more aware of it. I guess if you look back in history, even if you look at the creation of spinning wheels and the assembly lines and different technological changes and the Luddites, right? People are always, I guess, historically afraid of technological innovation and change. And so they resisted, especially workers who are going to be displaced or lose their jobs because of technological innovation and advancement. But in the end, society ends up benefiting. Point is, up until probably, I don't know, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, the pandemic, people just were much more optimistic. Our society, John F. Kennedy, we choose to go to the moon, not because it is easy, but because it is hard. And people embraced that. I would like for us to get back to that kind of attitude. And when I look at what's going on with a lot of things out there, some of it's scary. We're looking at artificial intelligence and medical technologies that make us question the ethics behind it, especially when it comes to things that involve genetics. Nevertheless, it's coming, whether we like it or not, and so we need to be involved. And by being involved, we can all try to guide this society that we have, our communities, our countries, along a path that will take us to an ethical place, a better place, to enhance freedom, to help us get back to something better, an improved version of what we used to have. And when I see this footage from Elon Musk and this gentleman who shot it with this lens, went out and rented a $17,000 lens to capture the Starship launch and then subsequent capture by the giant claws in detail. Amazing footage. And this is just, it gave me hope, inspiration. It inspired me. Again, I'm going to share the footage with you here right now. That was a long intro, but man, I'll tell you, these are scary times in many ways, but I'll tell you, they are sure exciting times too. Let's take a look at this. I'm not going to run the audio. I don't want a copyright strike on the YouTube channel, but man, I'll tell you, watch this. This was shot 5 miles away with this lens. Pans up, very steady. Look at this. And people, this is becoming like routine now, all these rocket launches, right? And Starlink, they're putting thousands of these Starlink satellites into orbit to give us wireless internet connectivity globally, really? It's amazing technology. This is connecting the whole world. Transformative for humanity. For better or for worse. And this is not going to plunge into the ocean, not in the way that it was back in the 60s and 70s with the Apollo program. They're going to reuse this thing. No waste. Bam! Look at this! How cool is that? That human beings are capable of that blows my mind. That's just a tube. Also, look at that. Great images, man. I'll tell you, when I was a kid, you remember science? Do you remember science fairs? I was into rocketry when I was young, like grade 6, 7, 8. We had science fairs. So I made hot air balloons out of, thin plastic. I was very much interested in aviation, and I was making models of airplanes and things like that for these science fairs and rockets. And I'll tell you, when I look at that, I don't know how the hell they do that. Because I guess my knowledge when it comes to how airplanes fly and rockets, it's not just about thrust, it's about controlling air and creating lift and airfoil shapes and high pressure, low pressure. And this is me speaking in my elementary school science fair talk, right? But how they do that, that's insanely complicated. But human beings did that. And when I look at that, man, I'm like, wow, human beings are capable of so much. If only we could just convince people to use all of that for positive things and dispense with all the wars, you know, the conflict, and cooperate more for mutual benefit. I'd sure like to get to that. But freedom isn't free, and sometimes you have to fight for it. And we'll continue to do that right here on the Maverick News Channel. And you guys are part of it. You have a voice here too. And we all have a duty to seek the truth. Or at least seek information and work toward analysis of information that helps get us closer to the truth every single day. And this is an interactive thing. This is a community, and you guys are part of it. I'll be back tomorrow night, and I hope you all join me again so we can continue our fight for freedom together. Our quest for freedom, quest for truth. See you tomorrow, 7 p.m. Eastern, on the flip side.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.